Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17, Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, this is from Intelligencer. It's called Their Toil by Kevin T. Dugan, staff writer at Intelligencer, who covers money and business. One of Scientology's young immigrant workers in 2003. Look at that. A child doing labor. More images of children doing hard labor for 18-hour days. This article was co-produced with Documented, a nonprofit publication that covers New York's immigrant communities. It was also featured in One Great Story, New York's Reading Recommendation newsletter. England, 1994. Tina was 14. Her parents lived at Scientology compounds in the United States, and church officials wanted Tina to come join them. She was 14. By using a R1 visa, a permit recently created by Congress for religious workers, good for 5 years. The officials told Tina, a pseudonym, what to tell anyone who asked, that she would be attending a special Scientology school. Yeah, the one that it's not even up to regulation in various states either. And volunteering for the church part-time. It wasn't true. Once approved, Tina worked shifts as long as 24 hours doing construction. Construction. Remember the statutes that I covered earlier? Building furniture and performing administrative tasks. None of it's voluntary, she told me. Hungary, 1997. Attila Sunkoli, then 21, was getting as many as 5 calls a day from Scientology officials, otherwise known as adults, urging him to come work for the organization in the U.S. Well, wait a minute, isn't working a job? In the U.S. on an R1 visa. He finally agreed, and to help him pass his interview, the recruiter shared a psychological profile of the person who would screen him at the U.S. consulate. Oh, I was covering the U.S. consulate the other day. The visa was approved. The visa was approved. And soon Sonkoli was off to Clearwater, Florida. Oh yeah, Clearwater PD, they're all about it. Where Scientology is one of its headquarters. An official there took away his passport. And made him sign contracts in English, a language he didn't understand. Sonkoli saw that what he'd been instructed to tell the consulate, that he'd been performing religious duties as a minister, what I talked about the other day, was a lie. They needed us to do disgusting work, he said, and very, very heavy manual labor. He's 14. I think said he was 14. Oh, he was a little older. Isn't that convenient? Well, anyways, the other gal was 14. He estimated that heavy manual labor. He estimated that 2/3 of the people working in Clearwater were from overseas. Almost like the Clearwater PD would know all about that. Canada, 2001. Haley Kaldani, then 17, otherwise known as a minor, and living near Vancouver, was fielding calls from a recruiter. Where are these recruiters getting the phone numbers? Who wanted her to get an R1 and move to Clearwater. Her parents were Scientologists. Well, there's my answer. And had sent her there a year earlier to take classes. So parents are just handing over their children. Kildani says she was RAPD in a pool by a man in his 40s. Again! Another young girl raped by a grown man. Wonder what the Clearwater police think about that. Or maybe they're okay with that kind of stuff. Just, you do wonder. Shank. Church officials had made her take responsibility and punished her. Oh, she was 17 when she got AR'd. A spokesperson said there was no report of rape to the church. Aw, aren't you guys good at covering up? You're so good at it. Do you rape little girls too? Aw. So you got to add her to the list. Keeps getting bigger. She just got to Clearwater and the guy just, he's like, I gotta R that little girl. After getting the document and entering the U.S., Kildani was taken to the demolition work. Oh, where's her parents? Was taken to do demolition, after she got art, of course, at a property the church owned. Several men were struggling with a heavy roll of industrial carpeting, and they handed the job off to Kildani and another girl. See, these aren't men, you guys. These are not fucking men. They are not men. I fucking destroyed my spine and neck, Kildani says. Today she regards Scientology's operation in Florida as a forced labor camp. Facts. This was clearly slave work. I guess the Clearwater PD, they're just like super okay with all that. Of course, Clearwater PD, they need to get all their extra money and all that from these child slaves. The R1 visa itself was false. There was no religious volunteering taking place. I was not a minister. I'd never done any minister certification or training. I was just a young girl. Immigration, what about that? Scientology's lying about these ministers. You guys know, they know. Haley Kildani in 2002. That's awful. Wonder what her ethnic background is. And what her status was in Canada. For the past year, I've been corresponding with more than 36 former Scientologists hailing from 12 countries on 5 continents. Immigration, INS. What do you think about that? They're bringing in children and saying that they're ministers, INS. Some joined the church when founder L. Ron Hubbard and convicted felon was still running the show. Some left as recently as last summer. Oh, do tell, that was just a few years ago. Whenever I asked them to talk about their time inside the organization, they didn't dwell much on Tom Cruise, volcanoes and aliens, cosmology, or any of the sensational stuff that gets the most attention. What they talked about was rules, bureaucracy, jargon, and quotas. The work for those who were part of Scientology's operations, especially those who were part of the clergy, known as the Sea Org. Their lives revolved around labor. They cleaned, cooked, landscaped, provided childcare. Again, how many times have we heard this? Stood guard, did construction and demolition. and performed a variety of tasks that brought in money to the church, all for little to no pay. At Scientology bases around the U.S., called orgs, laborers live in dorms and work shifts that are often as long as 16 hours. Though a few told me the sessions can stretch beyond 24 hours without breaks to sleep. Yeah. All the adults that come out and they're complaining about how they were going 24 hours with no sleep. Little to no care for the children. Over and over, my sources described how feeling unable to leave their orgs or refuse arduous work assignments was akin to involuntary servitude, even slavery. Scientology isn't a popular religion. Stephen A. Kent, a professor at the University of Alberta who studies the church, put its global size at no more than 30,000 people. But it is a rich one. Well, slave labor, man. With assets thought to be in the billions. Imagine they've got billions of dollars, but these Sea Org and staff members can't even afford shampoo or razors. Including prime parcels of real estate in major cities like New York and Los Angeles. The money flows in from its members in the form of fees for audits, a kind of confessional, and courses that are required to rise higher in the church. Pressure campaigns induce believers, mind-controlled, of every economic class to donate their life savings. In the U.S., though, Scientology has long had a crippling image problem that makes it difficult to attract new members domestically. You guys know who's in charge in this country. To boost numbers, church leaders, JWs do it too, have recruited thousands of people from abroad, making heavy use of the R1 visa program. A strategy that is all but unknown to the general public and has never been fully scrutinized. Federal rules specify that R1 applicants must have been a member of a given religion for 2 years and must promise that they are coming to the U.S. to work solely as a minister or to perform a religious vocation or occupation. But former Scientologists told me that church officials instructed them to give statements about their work to immigration officials. Immigration, how about that? That would clear them to obtain a religious visa. So they're coaching them just like Jan Eastgate coached the little girl to tell the police that she didn't get SA'd by a grown man, sexually abused. Then once they arrived, found themselves doing non-religious work for extended periods of time, otherwise known as manual labor. Such activity could expose Scientology to liability on a number of fronts. If a person is being hired to do administrative work and was coached to pretend that it's religious in nature, then that would be fraud, says Michael Wilds. Hello? An immigration expert who served as a federal prosecutor in Brooklyn for 4 years. Wilds singles out the line rehearsing and note memorization exercises that Tina Sonkoli and Kaldani and other workers told me they engaged in with Scientology officials. Aren't those called drills, you guys? Ahead of their visa interviews. If they were making sure that the individual stayed on message, then that would be acceptable conduct. But if they were charging them to say things that were just not truthful, it's called aiding and abetting, that would be actionable, he says. According to Wilds, even if some of the workers went on to perform ministerial work for Scientology, that does not bear on the secular, physical, and manual labor they performed. Facts. And they really do love to get the children to scrub the bathrooms with toothbrushes. It's one of their favorites. There's no window of time where you're doing menial stuff for a year and then you get religious content, he says. Facts. It has to be religious content from the beginning. Immigration. Other former prosecutors agree. You're talking about people who were bricklayers and scrubbing toilets. You see how they don't even say children? You're talking about children. Let's correct it. We're talking about children who are bricklayers and scrubbing toilets and things like that. Those are not religious functions. Those are not religious jobs. Not at all. Says Theodore J. Murphy, a former prosecutor for the Department of Homeland Security. The individual who was coaching them to do that could be involved in a conspiracy. Conspiracy. Which is also a criminal charge. Lottie Dottie and everybody, all these agencies just need to go in and clean house. Take the children away from these parents that are abusing their children. That's it. There's no other way around this crap. They want to disconnect all of them permanently. Disconnect the mothers from the children. If they're going to allow the children to get abused, they need to be disconnected permanently. Every former Scientologist I spoke with who came from a foreign country told me that after they arrived at a U.S. org, listen to this again, FBI, Homeland Security, they had their passports, visas, and other travel and identifying documents taken by church officials. You are now truly an undocumented person, says David Spalding, who spent 23 years as an immigration officer. They're smart. They're getting retired people to talk about it. Most recently overseeing investigations for a branch of the Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. You do not exist. You can't go to the police, not that the police would help. You can't talk to social service person. You can't buy milk. We own you. Reminds me of that Eminem song. A coordinated program to bring in foreign workers in the ways the former Scientologists describe would be enough for federal investigators to open a fraud inquiry. Well, we're waiting. According to Wilds, if they can prove that there's a pattern and practice of doing this, he says, they could shut down the whole church. Hello? Now we're talking. They could shut down the whole church from being able to avail themselves of the R1 religious worker program. Well, let's get busy. That would be an enormous blow to the church's operations. Facts. Especially because Scientology's ability to tap this labor pool has already been imperiled by the pandemic. In 2021, along with several other religious organizations, Scientology officials formally co-signed a letter to the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services describing the slow pace of visa approvals during the COVID era a crisis and calling for looser restrictions. Oh, Scientology capitalized on that to make them easier to obtain. There is good reason to suspect that the slowdown has strained the operations and finances of the church. Financial documents recently made public show that its main Florida base lost money in 2020. Karen Powell, again. I don't even know why they give these people like black and white space. Any kind of print. Karen Powell, that's what I'm talking about. A spokesperson for Scientology said by email, because she's not allowed out, that the organization strictly complies with U.S. immigration policies and works directly with Immigration Counsel to ensure compliance with the immigration policies. She needs to be in jail. And regulations of the United States. She needs to be in jail. She added that my sources were liars engaged in a coordinated and premeditated conspiracy. No, that's you. To level false allegations. She needs to be in jail. Scientology has successfully defended itself in court. Look at these lies. Against allegation of worker abuse before. So what? Just because you have a lot of money. In 2009, Mark and Claire Headley, a married American couple who spent more than a decade in the Sea Org, sued the church for human trafficking. I'm surprised they didn't win, to be honest. Claiming that the organization had stolen their wages, they should have included children. That's what bothers me about that. Force them into manual labor. Let's talk about the children labor, and force Claire to abort 2 pregnancies. A federal judge in California dismissed the case. Listen to this crap. Saying that the church, listen to this, was protected by a ministerial exception to labor laws. Hail Satan. The Ninth Circuit, that's also a very pivotal number, upheld the ruling, writing that the Headleys could have left the religion at any time. What about the children? If they would have included the children in the lawsuit, it wouldn't have ended that way, would it? In that the statute they sued under, the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, pertains to transnational crime. As if Scientology's not doing that, please. Compared to the Headleys, foreign workers, especially those who were brought into the U.S. as children, well, Claire Headley was brought from the UK, may have a stronger case. In April, 3 former Scientology members who were born abroad and drafted into the Sea Org as minors, filed a civil lawsuit against the church and its leader, David Miscavige. They allege violations of laws against trafficking, forced labor, peonage, and conspiracy. The church has not presented a full defense at this stage of the case and is seeking to move the matter to arbitration. You see, you know what though? It's coming to the point now where arbitration is not going to be able to be used in sexual abuse cases. It's already out there now, like as far as employment, but I believe a lot of judges are applying it to religion as well. Psych. It is denied that it broke U.S. law, saying that many of the allegations took place in the Caribbean or beyond statutes of limitations. Because of the litigants' age at the time in question, it's unclear what type of visas they possessed. But their lawsuit, which was filed in U.S. District Court in Florida, makes similar claims to those I heard from former Scientologists, with R1s over a span of decades. Facts. When this starts crumbling down, man, it's going to be, there's going to be a lot going on. One of the plaintiffs, Guywan Baxter, who was born in Australia, alleged that he was required to perform physical labor, including renovating a building, cleaning other facilities, and landscaping for 12 or more hours per day. There's that landscaping again, just like Mike Brown talked about. Lara FM talked about the little kids that made the brick streets in front of the Blue Building. 12 or more hours per day at a rate of $8 to $50 a week. His wife, Laura Baxter, claims that she was required to spend 8 to 10 hours per day performing arduous physical labor. See, the parents are the ones that gave their children up, so I'm done. Including digging trenches. There we go with the trenches again. Cleaning toilets. Oh, they love that one. And dumpsters. And landscaping. There we got landscaping again. I wonder if Scientology is actually making the children do landscaping of other companies. I don't know. It seems like it's usually in-house. It was paid roughly $25 a week. The third plaintiff, Valeska Paris, says church officials made her clean the premises for 12 to 18 hours per day, including requiring her to climb into in scrub garbage dumpsters. I've heard this several times. With toxic chemicals, without protective gear. Her weekly pay, she says, was $15. That's just insane, says Kent Williams, a litigator known for successfully representing hundreds of workers in a wage theft lawsuit against Chipotle. Oh, I gotta check that out. Prisoners make more than that. Yeah, we've talked about that. Prisoners actually eat better than the people in the Sea Org and staff members, child Scientologists, cadet org. How much value Scientology derived from immigrant workers is a matter of conjecture. Oh, I think they get a lot of value. Relying on a significant number of variables, how many hours per week they worked. You see why they don't like cameras? For how many years, at what nominal pay, and so on. But labor lawyers specializing in wage theft cases do attempt to make such calculations. 4 of these experts, Nicole Hallett, the director of Immigrant Rights Clinic at the University of Chicago Law School, Daniel Costa, the director of Immigration Law and Policy Research at the Economic Policy Institute, David Cooper, the director of the Economic Analysis and Research Network at EPI, agreed that based on estimates provided by former Scientologists, CIS data and tax documents obtained by sources over the past 30 years, Scientology's use of foreign workers has probably saved the church hundreds of millions of dollars and potentially more than $1 billion. Can you imagine if there was like really good team of lawyers to sue Scientology for that kind of money? Woo! Oh, more pictures of child labor. I'm definitely going to be keeping these. I got a lot of these pictures. And this was more recent. How You Like Us Now, Scientology. And that's in New York Magazine, more child labor. Look at that. Look at that, child labor. Oh, and let's not forget she had to get AR'd like the minute she came in the gates. Scientology's reliance on immigrant labor. Yeah, the word needs to get out. Like all those little festivals they're having in front of the Blue Building. People need to start informing them of the immigration violations. That's going to just like enrage the immigrant communities. They need to see all this. Scientology's reliance on immigrant labor is nearly foundational, going back to the early years of the religion. In 1967, 14 years after the church's founding, the IRS revoked its tax-exempt status after determining that Hubbard had unjustly enriched himself. In response, he founded the Sea Org sailing outside U.S. jurisdiction with his closest followers on a trio of ships. By the way, that's where a lot of the young girls and a few of the young boys were essayed on those ships. So anybody, if you could, I would appreciate it. Start a list of these. I kept one, you guys, I shared it the other day. If we can start a list of the names of who were on those ships. That auditor video that I made, that was one list. A lot of them are deceased, but those are the names of the rapists. I mean, just so we know. They hope to spread the religion globally, getting people's minds to clear or become free of pain and anxiety. But the voyage was an extended disaster with foreign practitioners of the religion getting banned in the UK. In 1975, Hubbard and his crew quietly returned to Clearwater, and it was there that the organization's cat and mouse game with the U.S. immigration system appears to have begun. I'm just reading, you guys, just remember this. This all started when we first came to the U.S. from the Apollo, says Mike Rinder. Was Rinder on the Apollo? I'm only asking because there were a lot of raping of the girls on that ship. I'm not saying Rinder did it, I'm just saying, who was born in Australia, referring to one of Hubbard's vessels. We came on tourist visas and were drilled and briefed to tell immigration, if they asked, that we were just coming in for a short vacation and that we all had return tickets. But then we just stayed. Rinder rose in seniority over the years, becoming head of Scientology's Office of Special Affairs and a spokesman for the church. He left the organization in 2007 and his kids and wife, disturbed by, among other things, its activities involving immigration and labor. I do believe that it's a fraud, Rinder says. After Congress created the R1 visa category with the Immigration Act of 1990, Scientology's leaders seem to quickly see its value. Well, they always do, don't they? The permit's rules hold that religious organizations are not obligated to pay R1 workers, though they usually have to provide some kind of non-salaried compensation, which can be just room and board. According to former immigration officials, getting one of the visas involves making relatively few financial disclosures to the government. They're valid for a long time, up to 5 years, and the holder has a clearer path than some other immigrants to getting a green card. I was covering that a little bit the other day. I hope that was helpful. The Church of Scientology is sprawling, comprising hundreds of corporations and nonprofits in different parts of the organization embrace the R1 at different times. The Sea Org in Florida seems to have been the first, according to interviews with people brought over on the travel documents. By 1992, church leaders were evidently willing to go to some length to ensure access to the visas. That year, after a Scientologist visa application was rejected several times in Greece, OSA officials formulated a plan to turn the situation around. Isn't that where Mike Rinder was? Written in the militaristic jargon of the church, a memo discussing the strategy included reference to black propaganda, the act of smearing a perceived enemy, and instructions to meet with a certain consular official, bought off, you guys know, and potentially blow his withholds off, expose personal secrets. Scientology had its tax-exempt status reinstated by the IRS in 1993. Gotta wonder how many children were sexually abused since then. You know, those wealthy guys, well, not all the wealthy guys, but a lot of wealthy people come in there and then they are the children. Not just the wealthy, but because they get a tax write-off. That's what I'm saying. And the following year, officials in Florida helped a 14-year-old Mexican boy, they didn't put boy in there, named Serge Gill, get an R1. They had a person who handled what to say, how to coach, what lawyers to go to. Everything, says Gill, whose parents were Scientologists. They were cocky. They were like, we just became a religion. I'm going to write you this letter. It says that you are a minister in training. He signed a billion-year contract with the Sea Org, as is custom. It's not hyperbole, Gill says. It took a long time for me to understand I was a slave. There's Serge. Aw. I don't know who else is there. That gal in the back looks sad. Clearwater officials sent instructions on obtaining visas to its bases abroad. Well, they're basically telling people how to commit crimes, and they know they're doing that. They know they're committing crimes. Immigration, you can't tell me that immigration doesn't have a clue about this. It's just so sad for these children. One of the people who saw the directives firsthand was Peter Boyaye, a former Sea Org officer who worked in Budapest during the 1990s and 2000s. There was a lot of pressure because they saw it as an easy way to quickly get a lot of people. You see? Bonye recalls Clearwater officials faxing, there's that name again, officials, fabricated letters claiming that workers were needed from Budapest because there was a large population of Hungarian-speaking Scientologists in America who required their assistance. They didn't really need people from Hungary to serve Hungarian Scientologists, Bonye says. They just needed the workforce. You see, they know what they're doing, bro. They know what they're doing. That was a cover story. Wait, where'd I... After prospects sat for interviews with consular officials. You guys, do you think that all of these offices don't know what's going on? Come on. Come on. Bonye says they would report back on the questions they were asked and what answers seemed best. Those details went into scripts for future applicants. Oh, here we go with Powell again.
Powell, the spokesperson, said that Bonye was not involved in the immigration of any Hungarians for church staff.
Ugh. Clearwater officials, oh, here we go with that word again, instructed overseas orgs to focus their recruitment. They were headhunting for very specific crowds and very specific people, says Kirill. Weren't, you guys remember when people were out protesting in front of the recruiting center in Los Angeles? Wasn't the guy they call Lurch, wasn't he Hungarian? And that one of the young ladies, I think she was Hungarian. Very, very pretty young girl. I forgot what her name was. A member of Scientology from 2006 to 2018 who worked for the Moscow org. Russians said, man, Russians, and Russia said, you guys got to go. He asked that his last name be withheld. The people they targeted, he says, came from humble backgrounds. That's what they do. No English at all, no job. It's what they do. They always go for the vulnerable. They go for really, really poor people, people that are going through marital issues. Their husband just died. They don't speak English. They live in a foreign country where there's less prospects. Oh, they just always. Prisoners, people on drugs. It's so sad. That's black magic, you guys. No job, but no big obligation to their family. No credit card debt, no mortgages. Yeah, see, they're already scoping it. Kirill says he was personally involved in efforts to coach visa applicants. That's a crime. Helping to translate scripts they could memorize from English into Russian. The depth of depravity and manipulation, it's so sick. The Moscow org also kept track of which consulates were easiest to get visas from. See, all these people are just like a chip. Or like a bargaining chip. That's what they look at people as. Moscow was considered more difficult, good, than Vladivostok, St. Petersburg, or Yekaterinburg, and would sometimes send people to former Soviet satellite countries where immigration officials were perceived as less exacting. Prospective workers were told that Scientology was a gateway to a better life. You see, yeah, where you can be a labor slave and work 18 to 24-hour days. A path to fulfillment on a personal, professional, or spiritual level. On the streets, that's called bait. Recruiters' pitches varied by target. Men might forge emotional relationships with young women. Oh, here we go with that again. Otherwise known as pedophilia. There's a name for it. It's called pedophilia. Oh, just so sickening. It's sickening. They would hit on young girls. You know, I gotta take a break. They would hit on young girls and make them fall in love with them because they're both hot. Do you believe this? It just enraged. You guys don't even know the rage I feel. And then get them in the Sea Org with the impression that they would date. And I want to know how old these freaking bastards were. One female ex-Sea Org member who worked at compounds in Florida and Venezuela, oh, that should be really great down in Venezuela, told me, for another woman who says she came to the U.S. from Canada at about 13 years old. Predators, you guys. I just don't want to hear it anymore. I do know a lot of the parents are tricked, so I mean, I understand that. But that's when you go in and you fight. And you do things I can't tell you on YouTube. The pitch was an education for a career in designing buildings. I joined on the premise that I would be immediately put into some kind of architecture program. This is trafficking 101, man. And have the possibility of designing their buildings, she says. How sad this is, you guys. They come from these countries where there's so much poverty. This just makes me really sad. I bought it, and it was a complete lie. It was just slave labor. Recruits told me they were shown pictures of nice living quarters. You see, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And had no idea they would be working brutally long hours. Many also thought they wouldn't be required to believe in the tenets of Scientology. Wow. One of the big selling points is that you can supposedly, and this is completely not true, be any religion and not be Scientologist. Yeah, it's a lie. Says an American, a former member of the religion who worked with recruiters in California. See, those recruiters, man, they're evil. Even if they were tricked themselves, that what they're doing is evil. After reality hit, some disappeared or tried to. Good. The American who worked in LA described witnessing church officials post people at the nearest train station, you see? And like the cops don't know this is going on, right? I do hope some of these dirty police officers get charged as well. I do. That is some sad. Oh, is that sad? They're new to this country and have no idea what's happening. The level of depravity and evil. I bet some of those native Hungarians or Russians would have something for their asses. Russia, 1999. Ekaterina Tikhanova, 11. Oh my goodness. 11. And her mother, Yelena, were living in the freezing and prospectless Siberian city of Barnaul. Her grandmother had converted to Scientology while on a trip to Florida. Oh boy. So gullible. I'm sorry. A few years earlier, and she pushed her daughter and granddaughter to join the religion as a way to attain prosperity. Can you guys even imagine? She sold the American dream. Tikhonova says, just the thought of going from Siberia to America sold right then and there. Tikhonova's meeting with U.S. immigration officials was at the end of the summer at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. In the days before the appointment, her grandmother coached her, you see, on what questions she would face and how she was to answer, especially regarding whether she would be likely to leave the U.S. when the visa expired. She wasn't acting like a grandmother. She was acting like a Sea Org member. Tikhonova says, I was drilled and drilled. How many people have talked about those drills? And coached to answer the question without stumbling or anything. Wouldn't, like, the immigration officials be suspicious of that? Like, I guess most people prepare for those questions. But like me, being with my investigative mind, I would think if it's too, like, rehearsed and too prepared, I wouldn't trust it. And all you'd have to tell me is Scientology, you know? I was really scared. She's only 11 years old, you guys. Oh. I was really scared going into the interview. I was 11 years old, and I knew I had to lie. On her grandmother's advice, Tikhonova even brought pictures of their family to the interview to persuade immigration officials that their stay would be temporary, she says. Wow. This is unbelievable. I'll bet the immigration officials out there are aware now. I'll bet they know. They know. Efforts to contact Tikhonova's mother and grandmother for comment were unsuccessful. Of course they were. Tikhonova passed the interview. After about a week and a half, she was off to Clearwater. Can you guys imagine being 11? How many, like, horror stories have we heard about the children that were just dumped out there in those barracks, or what do they call them? They're always trying to be military. Like, with all the bunks and stuff, the little, like, children. This is awful, man. It's awful. Where she began working 8 hours a day. Only 8? Housekeeping, doing construction, and preparing food. There you go, you guys. I got to keep this article. Another 11-year-old working in the kitchen. But nobody knows about the children, do they? Oh, it enrages me. Preparing food in an industrial kitchen, just like SP Chef. What's his name again? I forget his real name. Lots of children in those kitchens. She was also required, there we go with the studying. They always do that. They do the manual labor, and then they force them to study all day. No math, no reading, no geography, no history, or whatever you know, what's going on now. Required to study Scientology doctrine for an additional 5 hours a day. She's 11, you guys. 11 years old. Something was glossed over, though, if you guys notice. The person writing the article didn't like highlight where's the mother and grandmother while this little girl, this 11-year-old girl, is dumped off in this barracks situation with all these other traumatized little children, wetting the beds and all kinds of horrible stuff going on. It's horrible. It's going on right now. It's going on right now. Living conditions were cramped in dorms, where tiles fell off the walls and carpets were dirty. At first, she and her mother shared a room. Okay, her mother was with her, with bunk beds. But after her mother became a member of the Sea Org, they were separated. I don't even want to say it. And Tikhonova was only able to see her mother at meals a few times a month. And you see, like, this is where I'm seeing all the cover-up, right? Everybody knows what's going on. When Tikhonova persisted in complaining about living and working conditions, her mother filed a report on her. Isn't that wonderful, you guys? That's otherwise known as a KR. Knowledge report. Snitching, just like in the Nazi times. But I guess like that, it's just, you know, the snitching in the Nazis and the snitching in Scientology. It's just a great big coincidence that landed Tikhonova in what is known as ethics handling. How many times I talk about this? Oh, I'm keeping this article. How many videos have I made about this? Children in ethics handlings. Where members are subjected to interrogations, members otherwise known as children, that can last for hours. Tikhonova was also made to clean toilets. There we go again. Boy, they really like the children to clean the toilets, don't they? Nasty people. And scrub an industrial dumpster. That's another one they love. It seemed like a prison camp, she says. It was. For the next few months, keep in mind, she's only 11 years old, you guys. I'm going to try not to cry this time. And also, what we're not talking about, too, is that she didn't speak English yet, I don't believe. Oh, this is so heartbreaking. For the next few months, her contact with her mother was limited to 5 and 10 minutes. That's her mother's fault. But of course, too, now you guys also see what they did to the mother. And I know it's the mother's fault that they're there, but we don't know what kind of living conditions her mother was in, or the grandmother. And, you know, grandmother bought the whole tea. You know, she bought the tea or whatever. Now mom is figuring out what it really is, because I don't think she really knew. So now what is her mom going to do? She doesn't have her passport. She doesn't have her documentation. She doesn't have any money. What is she going to do? Oh, it's just so sickening. It's so sickening. One day, Tikhonova told her mother that she wanted to get legally emancipated and leave the compound. Her response was, "Where are you going to go? Who's going to take you?" That was just what I was talking about. Then I felt like I was stuck. I mean, and who knows, maybe her mother would have agreed. I mean, think about the conditions people are coming from. Oh, this is so awful. It's so evil. After a month of literally just being punished and punished by getting interrogated, 11-year-old girl, you guys, and everything else, and then getting assigned even more hard manual labor, because now I'm quote-unquote in trouble. It's the control. I felt like they just wore me out mentally and physically. It's what they want. They do it in the military. Do it a lot of other places. To the point that I just gave in. I was like, fine, whatever. I'm wrong for wanting to actually have a fucking relationship with my mother. You guys, it's just so heartbreaking. I'm wrong, absolutely wrong, I confess. You see, that's where they're breaking the maternal and the child bond. Brave New World, you guys, oh, you have to go watch that movie. Read the book, ideally. Read the book. Everything's in there. Everything in Scientology, Brave New World. Everything. I just realized at that point that I have no choice. By then I'm 12. I have no place to go. Where's Daddy? I'm in the United States. See, just what I was saying. We didn't speak a lick of English. See? They trap people. When we got here, even if her mother wanted to do something, what is her mother going to do at this point? What's she going to do? We have no family here, no friends, a brand new country. That's that isolation, you guys. Scientology are experts in isolation. And I think a lot of people are just going along with the policies. They don't even know what they're doing. I have extended family there. Oh, wait. The only thing I can do is go back to Russia. I have extended family there. But who's going to take me? I am a financial burden. I am a child. So I felt like I was just stuck. I had no other choice. That is so sad. It reminds me of some of those those young lady recruiters at the recruiting office out there. You guys remember? Remember the real pretty one they call a young lady? One of them went out, came to America to be an actress or something. That was the one I was thinking about. I forgot her name. Real pretty. And the Shannon, she's a real pretty young lady too. Something's going on with Shannon though. I do worry about her. Tikhonova passed her Scientology classes and eventually worked as an administrative assistant to an auditor. You see more child workers in Flag. Why is it these adults, there's so many adults not talking about that? It bothers me a lot. Every time people go to Flag in Florida, in that Fort Harrison building, where they're doing all the courses, the entire staff, 90% of the staff are children. People know. Making sure that people arrived at their auditing sessions on time. In 2006, she went back to Russia to acquire a new passport. During the trip, she says she was raped by 2 men. I read this one before. It's so sad. Shank. Back in the U.S., Scientology officials grilled her for days. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, because you know it was her fault, right? Asking her questions about the incident over and over again. You know what this is, you guys? This is what you call a rape culture. This is what you call a rape culture. It happens in the military. It happens in the United States Olympics. It happens, what was that school, the football coach that was R-ing the boys. This is a rape culture. Scientology expelled her from the church. She had a green card that allowed her to stay. You know what? I guess they were seeing her as a liability. That's so sad. I mean, maybe it's good they kicked her out, though. She had a green card that allowed her to stay in the U.S., but she decided to return to Moscow. She had no money of her own and thought she would have ended up homeless in America. That's true. What they do with immigrants is they threaten them all the time, says Tikhonova, who eventually changed her name to Katrina Reyes. And that's exactly what they did with me. You see, you guys, what they do? That is so sad. These babies don't have anyone loving them. It's so sad. All babies. More children in the Sea Org right here in our faces. Child. Katrina Reyes, ne Ekaterina Tikhonova. I liked her first name, though. As immigration laws have changed, so have Scientology's tactics to protect its flow of foreign workers in 2006. A report by the Government Accountability Office, you guys catch that? Singled out the R1 visa program as ripe with opportunities for fraud, of course. And federal authorities set about overhauling the program. Oh, here we go. Can't wait. Let's see what they really did, because I can't wait to hear the BS. Scientology officials. There's that word again, you guys. Just like prestigious executives. Submitted 3 letters of objection. Of course they did. One was signed by Glenn E. Stilo, whom Rinder, you guys know, and other sources described as a major figure in Clearwater's R1 program. Stilo's letter challenged nearly every major alteration that the government was considering. He sought to reduce the level of training ministers would have to attain and opposed a regulatory change that would define religious vocation as involving duties that differ from those performed by secular members of a congregation. They do the same tricky-dicky stuff with the schooling of the children. They do the same stuff. In his letter, Stilo acknowledged that a small percentage of our religious order perform work at our retreat that may not be considered a religious function, such as administrative work unique to the ministry section of our church, or upkeep of church property and grounds. The letter included a line that hinted Scientology would challenge any citizenship and immigration services regulations. They're just so arrogant. It didn't like on the grounds of the separation of church and state. It appears that CIS is treading on dangerous, unconstitutional entanglement ground. Unreal. The next year, 2008, the agency abandoned a number of the proposed revisions. You guys, at this point, I'm not buying all these stories. I'm not buying them. That would have strengthened its rules around what a religious vocation is. I don't buy it, you guys. It's all fake. All of it is fake. What counts, man, this is long. What counts as religious work is not a straightforward matter, complicated by the broad latitude that the First Amendment gives to religious institutions to define their faith and practice. What a joke. The State Department's Foreign Affairs Manual provides that, that might be something I need to look up, provides that religious visas can be granted not only to people with specific occupations, like priests or cantors, but also those who have committed their lives to religious vocations. People like monks and nuns. It says their work can be any type of activity within the religious vocation's denomination or its affiliate. The manual goes on to say that the emphasis for granting the visas is on a person's status in an organization, rather than the content of their work. While this would appear to open the door for religions to deem any work done in their name as religious. Yeah, like manual labor? Come on. You're telling me that agency just shut its doors just because one or two Scientologists threw some mumbo-jumbo at them? Come on. While this would appear to open the door for religions to deem any work done in their name as religious, like scrubbing toilets, both Wilds and Spalding say that isn't the case. No immigration application or lawyer will ever contemplate any work being permitted. Wild says, a religious worker visa is exactly that, for religious work. Nothing more would be permitted. It would be a breach of immigration law. Facts. Spalding says that while it's up to a religion to define its own practices, that doesn't mean the State Department is then required to issue visas to everyone who claims to be doing religious work. They both said that people who might not be able to consent to a devotional life, such as children. Well, how about that, you guys? People who didn't understand what they were signing up for, or those, that would cover everyone in Scientology, or those who joined under duress, that covers all of them, might also not be permitted by the State Department. An FBI report from 2009 noted that as many as half of the Sea Org's workforce came from abroad. Yeah, but yet they've still done nothing about it, right? That's almost a mockery. Right there, that's them mocking us. Other government records give a detailed look at Scientology's extensive pursuit of R1s in the period that followed. According to CIS data obtained by the researcher R.M. Siebert through Freedom of Information Act requests, which was first published by the journalist Tony Ortega, church officials submitted as many as 4,160 applications for R1 visas from 2009 to April 2017. Maybe I should do a FOIA request. This is a count of I-129 forms, which can involve other kinds of visas besides the R1, but many former Scientologists told me that church officials use those other visa types. Officials' use of those other visa types was negligible. Of course they were. Each case must be approved twice, first by CIS, then by the State Department, and they're all putting their stamp on it. Former government officials and Scientology insiders told me that for some countries, CIS approved nearly every file. CIS data show that since 2017, the overall approval rate has been above 90%. What does that tell you, you guys? Come on. The State Department standard was tougher. It greenlit about 80% of all religions R1 applications. Sucks for the children, doesn't it? During the period in question, according to its published reports, a spokesman declined to provide information about the success rate for Scientology specifically. What does that mean, you guys? A spokesman? Who's the spokesman? But if the 80% figure applied to the church, from the State Department? You guys, that just tells everything. It would mean that in these years, the relatively tiny faith won nearly 9% of all the 9/1 visas granted globally. That's a lie. It's 90%. Russia, where groups linked to Scientology have been declared undesirable by the government, seems to have been a particularly fruitful recruiting ground. Yeah, they put a lot of Russian Scientologists in prison, too. Every time someone says, I'm an oppressed category in Russia, we approve it without even blinking. Doesn't even occur to us that it might be a problem, says David Spalding. Can you believe this bullshit they're trying to feed people? It makes me sick. The former federal immigration officer, a CIS spokesperson, said that a person's nationality doesn't factor into whether an R1 applicant will receive a visa. Church officials submitted as many as 660, see that number, R1 visa applications tied to Russia during the 2009 to 17 period. CIS signed off on 637. It's not clear how many the State Department then awarded final approval, but the total number of R1 visas is granted to Russians is strikingly close, 649. Data from after 2017 is not publicly available. Isn't that convenient, you guys? Isn't that convenient? Wakey, wakey. But around that time, Scientology's appetite for R1 visas seemed only to be increasing. Oh, give me more, give me more. We need to suck off their energy. In 2016, the Church's San Diego branch asked the U.S. government for permission. Listen to that, you guys. Permission to sponsor the work permits, as the headquarters in Clearwater had done. A former Scientologist who visited the org at the time, working as a training supervisor, says that like other sites, it depended on foreign labor to operate. Recruiting local Scientologists was a pain in the ass, she says. It was a lot easier to get people in from Eastern Europe, Mexico, South America. That's because local people know what's going on. Immigration officials scheduled an R1 sponsorship inspection for the end of 2016. Isn't that great, you guys? You see? You guys see. And later granted approval. They approved it. That's so sad for the kids. Afterward, the training supervisor says, the one with no name, a leader of the San Diego operation circulated a memo to other sites detailing how to successfully prepare for government inspectors. They do this for everything. Like even child services, it's like everything's just a freaking joke. It's all a big lie. Really specific shit, she says. What wording you have to use, how you have to describe it, that's called aiding and abetting. Conspiracy. What jobs are eligible for an R1? What jobs can be made to sound as if they are eligible for an R1? What jobs can be made to sound as if they're eligible for an R1? A CIS spokeswoman did not respond, of course not, to questions about the inspection. You see, that's cover-up. A State Department spokesperson wrote in an email, the one with no name, the Bureau of Consular Affairs takes all allegations of fraud seriously. Yeah, right. That's why they approved for the San Diego office to do the same that they're doing Clearwater. And works aggressively, sure, to ensure the integrity, of U.S. visa and passport adjudications in all consular services we provide worldwide. It's just unbelievable. Just, you guys know, like, how the clown courts is? There's just... There isn't a lot of case law on religious worker visa fraud. It's because it's making America a lot of money. But one recent dispute has parallels with some of the accusations made by former Scientologists. Last year, a group of Indian workers filed a class action lawsuit, I'm going to cover this too, against a Hindu organization in New Jersey, alleging that it trafficked people to the U.S. on R1 visas under the guise of religion, when they were actually there to help construct temples. According to the complaint, the sect Bochasanwasi Sri Akshar Puruspotam, I'm not even going to read all that, that's too much, Swami Iran Sansa, or BAPS, instructed the workers to tell immigration officials that they would do decorative painting and carving, while in reality, you guys know this is everywhere. In reality, they did construction and stonemasonry. The plaintiffs also alleged that their passports were confiscated. Yeah, I'm going to cover this one. BAPS has said in court filings that it did nothing wrong. Of course not. Deny, deny, deny. The day the suit was filed, the FBI raided the temple. This is why I wanted to cover it, because the FBI actually did do something about that one. And a judge has stayed the case while the Justice Department investigates. Can't wait to see what happens there. For decades, scrutiny of Scientology has tended to focus on the outrageous and the glamorous. Glamorous? There's nothing glamorous about Scientology. Missing how the church aggressively used an obscure visa program and created a pool of exploited laborers, numbering in the thousands. Yeah, children. The blind spot even seems to extend to law enforcement. Facts. This blind spot even seems to extend to law enforcement. In 2018, Serge Gill met with investigators at the FBI and Department of Homeland Security in Los Angeles to discuss human trafficking. Yeah, they didn't do anything, did they? He hasn't heard anything, since. The same year, Mike Rinder says he met with an immigration and customs enforcement agent in Tampa Bay to raise similar concerns. He also doesn't know if investigators have acted on his information. For decades, the R1 visa has been a starting point for thousands of people coming into the United States looking for a better life or a new spiritual beginning. Well, I mean, honestly, if you look all around, we're really good at exploitation in America. We're really good at it. Before spending years doing backbreaking work for Scientology, even those who've managed to leave the church have had to deal with the traumas from their lives inside. Suicide attempts, and actually there's a lot of successful suicides. Depression, forced separation from their families. You know what? And their families that do that, forget them. Just forget them. A feeling of displacement from the world. When people think of Scientology, they think Hollywood. They think funny. They think aliens. They think it's a big joke. Well, it's changing now, says Haley Kaldani, the Canadian who says she was raped and suffered an injury performing heavy labor. I spent the last 19 years pretending that never happened so I could try to fit into society and be normal. This has to be stopped. People need to know this exists. Facts. I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.